boys and girls. This is our lesson from yesterday. I'm sorry if you struggled a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit more guidance on this, and we're going to have a take two. So this is the very first slide. The other day when we were working with numbers, we were working with a number line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you to use the highlighter tool as well as some of the text box tools to do this. So looking here, it says use the vertical number line to round 12 and 345 to the nearest tenths place. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to use that highlighter tool, and then we're just going to highlight the spot that they're asking us to round to. So they're looking for us to round to either 12 and 3/10 or to 12 and 4/10. So I'm going to put those two numbers, I'm going to use my text box, and I'm just going to make a text box for each of those ends. So 12 and 3/10 would be my first spot to round to. So 12 and 3/10. Now, I'm going to put a 0 at the end because these little numbers in between, it's just going to be a little bit more helpful for us. So 12 and 3/10 would be my first number, or I can bump up and I can do the 12 and 4/10. Now, technically, I'm going to put another 0 after that. Now, this point right here is the middle point. So what number, here is my 30, here is my 40, what number would go between there? Well, let's put that in. This would be my 12, and so if I'm counting 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35 is actually my middle point, okay? So now, once you get those text boxes in, you figure out what your two ends are and then what the middle point would be. Then you're going to just use this little marker tool, one of these guys here, to draw the little individual marks. So this is 30, this would be 31, 32, 33, 34, and here's 35. If I continue on, 36, 37, 38, 39, and then there's my 4/10 or 40. Now, I'm going to grab another text box, and then I'm going to put the number that we are rounding in my box. Now, keep in mind, this 34 right here is really what I'm looking at, okay? So, if I put my number in, I'm going to say 12 and 3/400. This 4 is what is going to help me position my text box. Let me just shrink it down. And let's drag this over here and figure out where it would go on our number line. So here's 12 and 3/10 or 12 and 30/100. Here's 30. This would be 31. Here's 32. Here's 33. Ah, here's 34. So this is where our number would be. Now, is this closer to 12 and 3/10 or 30/100, or would it be closer to 12 and 4/10 or 40/100? Well, it's almost at the halfway point, but not quite. This would actually be rounded back to 12 and 3/10. Now, I'm going to give you a little clue. If this number, and I'm going to make it a nice bright red color, and I'm going to draw a little arrow right here. If the number behind the number that you are rounding, come on little tool here, if this number right here is 5 or above, 5 or higher, you're going to give it a shove up to that next number. So if it's 5 or bigger, the rule of rounding is that you go up. If it's less than 5, you're going to go back down or keep it at the 10th or 100th that it was at. So let me put a little text box in there, and then we are just going to put our solution in. So we can see that 12 and 3/400 would be rounded back to 12 and 3/10. Let's plug that in. 12 and 3/10. Okay, let's try another one together. All right, so now this is the exact same number, and we're going to do the exact same thing, except this time they want us to round to the nearest hundredths. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my highlighter tool, and I'm going to underline the hundredths position. So here's tenths, here's hundredths right here. Okay, so now my choice is to put it at 12 and 3/400, or I would go up to 12 and 3/500. And I'm just going to circle that as the number that we're really looking at. So my two ends, remember we're going to get a text box and we're going to put those in. So I can keep it at 12 and 3/400, Or I can bump it up and say, nope, I'm going to go up to 12 and 35 hundredths. Okay, now I am actually going to put zeros after these because that's where I feel like it gets a little bit confusing, because I'm going to take these numbers and now I have to figure out the middle point. So I'm really going to focus on this 40, 340 or 350. My middle point is going to be 345. So let me get another text box. This is a lot of work, isn't it? But the number theory behind it is super important for you to understand. So now I'm going to put in 12 and 345 thousandths. Okay, and it's the thousandths that's going to help me know how I round. Now, remember that rule? Let's make a prediction. If the number behind this is 5 or above, we're going to give it a shove up to that next place value place. So my prediction, this is a 5 back here. We are going to bump it up to this next one. Let's see if it's right, though, with the marks that we are going to be making. All right, so now let's come down here. I'm going to switch my color to something fancy. So I've got 12 and 340 thousandths. So I've got the 40. Here would be 41. Here would be 342. Here's 343. Here's 344. And now my 345 is there. I've got 346 thousandths, 347, 348, 349. There's my 350. Now I'm going to grab another text box. I'm going to put the number that we are trying to round right here. So 12, and 345 thousandths. Okay, so let's shrink this guy down and figure out where he goes. 12 and 345. Ooh, that's right in the middle here, isn't it? So the rule is, if it's right in the middle, I'm going to round up to that next place value place. So my answer is going to be this right here, 12 and 35 hundredths. 12 and 35 hundredths. And that is my answer. Okay, so now it is asking me for this one right here. Which number is greater? Is the first number greater, where I rounded it to the 10th place? This one right here. Or would the second slide that we did, where we rounded to the 100th place, which one would be bigger? Well, let's look. So on this one, I have 12 and 3/10. Technically, there's a ghost zero there, so it would be 12 and 30 hundredths. So that's rounding to the nearest 10th place, 12 and 30 hundredths. Remember that. Now, if I look at this one, it's 12 and 35 hundredths. So what's bigger, the 30 or the 35? Okay, so you are going to have to explain that to me with a text box. Okay, so you're going to redo this assignment, and you are going to use that text box to explain your answer. Now, this is going to be the same kind of problem that we used before. So I'm going to put in some hints for you so that you can use those hints in your work. Okay, so when you get to this one, you are going to look at the problem. Use the vertical number line to round this great big number to the nearest 10th position. Okay, so using that highlighter tool, you're going to say, okay, well, here's the 10th position right here. So I can either keep it at 6/10 behind this whole number, or I can go up to 7/10. So I'm going to put that in, and I'm also going to put this in. Okay, so the number in front is going to stay the whole number. I say 987 and 6/10, or I'm going to bump up to the top end, which would be 987, 987 and 7/10. Now, just because it's going to be easier for me to do my single little marks here and figure out that middle point, that little 0 is going to come in and be my hero. I'm going to put that 0 behind it. 0. Okay, now between 60 and 70, is my middle point. It's going to be a 65 there. So let me just put that in too. 987 and 65 hundredths. Okay, so now I'm going to take that little tool and I'm going to put my numbers in here. This would be 987 and 61. This would be 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70. You are going to get a text box. You're going to type your number in, 987 and 65 hundredths. Shrink it down, place it where you think that it would go. Sorry. Shrink it down and place it where you think that it would go. And then tell me, would you keep it at 6/10 or would you go up? Remember that rule, if it is 5 or above, you're going to give it a shove up to that next place value place. So you will need to do this one. Okay, now we have the same number, same concept, except we are going to do hundredths this time. So now this is where I'm rounding. So now let's get our two ends. I will have you try this one, and then you're going to do the same thing with comparing them. So let's get our two ends there. Here's a text box for my low end. Here's a text box for my high end. And then here is a text box for my middle point. All right, so now here we go. I'm going to put in my my ends. So I've got my hundredth spot underlined. Everything in front of that hundredth spot is going to stay the same. So I plug in my 987 and 65 hundredths. So I'm going to keep it at 65. Okay, or one more up would be 66. So then that's going to be my top end. 987 and 987 and 66 hundredths. Now, because I love that 0 at the end, that 0 is going to help me know how to count by ones. Okay, so now let's figure out our middle point. I've got a 650, I've got a 660, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, oh, 55. So now I'm going to put my middle point in. 987 and 987 and 60, let's see here, 55, sorry, 55 hundredths, okay? So now, and then I'm going to put that 0 at the end. You then are going to put those little marks, okay? So this would be 650, 651, 652, 653, 654. There's my, oh, should be 650, sorry. It should be a 6 here, sorry guys. 650, this should be 655. My goodness, it's late at night. 655. Okay, so let's go back. 650, 651, 652, 653, 654, 655. Then I would have 656, 657, 658, 659, 660. You will then make a text box. You're going to take that text box and put our original number in, 987 and 654 hundredths. Shrink it down and figure out where on our number line it would be, and then your answer is going to be one of these two. Are you going to round back and keep it at the 65, or are you going to round up? Okay, so you will do that one. And then finally, you need to tell me, how do number lines help you round? I hope that this little video helps you as a redo for you to redo your work today. Sorry, it was so frustrating. Hopefully this helps. You guys are awesome.